If you've ever heard of the zone of genius, you should know our guest, Gay Hendricks. He says we can achieve happiness, success, and live a no-compromise life. Episode 202 features Gay Hendricks, psychologist, author of The Big Leap, The Genius Zone.
Wonder is the most underutilized tool that human beings have as a change tool in ourselves, because many of us go around, especially as we get more successful, in thinking we're right.
I'm Andy Wong, host of the Inspired Money podcast and financial advisor at Runnymede Capital Management. Is it possible that our own fears and self-imposed limits are keeping us from achieving our success? Are we standing in our own way to our path toward financial freedom? Our guest, Gay Hendricks, says you should seek to find your zone of genius. This means identifying your unique gift that is your greatest contribution to the people around you, at work and in your non-working life. Once you've identified your zone of genius, you cannot fear taking risks to reach your potential, and you cannot self-sabotage yourself for fear of realizing your success. In this episode, you'll learn identifying and staying in your zone of genius, how to effectively say no, especially to things not directly in your zone of genius, and finding a mantra or central intention that can guide every decision you make. Now let's get inspired with Gay Hendricks. Gay, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, Andy. It's really great to be with you. I'm a fan.
Well, thank you. Let's jump right in. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
My granddad took me into a bank when I was it was for my birthday. So it may have been when I was 5 years old. I'm not sure I was in school yet. But he took me into a bank and traded a $1 bill for a silver dollar. That will tell you how long ago this was. You probably weren't even born when you could trade your money for silver dollars. But there was a time, believe it or not, fellow Americans, when you could walk into a bank and get a silver dollar for your paper dollar. And I thought that was just absolutely magical. You know, that this silver dollar was like, that was real. And so anyway, that was my first thing I remember, was trying to ask my granddad about, why is it that you would carry around paper if you could carry around this thing I've got here, you know? And he was trying to explain it to me, but I didn't quite get it. For me, the silver dollar was the one that looked valuable to me.
Well, it had some weight to it.
Yeah, and to this day, by the way, I'm a bit of a gold bug. I started collecting gold, both bullion, stocks, and things like Eagles and Krugerrands and things like that back in the early 80s. And I've continued to do that, and I'm always happy. I have plenty of stocks too, but when the stock market has a contraction, I'm always delighted. Especially the last piece of gold I bought was for $381. So I'm especially delighted these days.
That is great. Do you have any of those silver dollars that you exchanged with your grandfather?
I do. Yeah, I have in fact, it sent me into a lifetime, early life of being a coin collector. And I just loved collecting coins. And I continued the hobby up until I was in college, and then got too busy to keep it. But I still have a lot of my, in fact, I don't know if you can see behind me, I've got that red box you see back there behind me is full of valuable 50-cent pieces. And I inherited them from my father-in-law when he passed away, and I'm eager to go through them. I haven't had a chance to go through them yet to actually identify their value, but many of them are made of actual silver. So most of them are made of actual silver. So looking forward to it. But yeah, anything like that with money. You know, I remember once I used to coach Michael Dell, and I asked him once what his earliest memory he had, what kind of present he got, the first present he ever got. That's a common question I ask clients. And he said it was a calculator, and what he wanted to do was take it apart. He didn't necessarily want to calculate, but he wanted to find out how the darn thing worked. And I remember it's such a personality difference between him and Warren Buffett, because I remember somebody asking Warren Buffett a similar question. And what Warren had, what he wanted as a present was a little change maker like bus drivers used to wear, where they went ka-chink, ka-chink, ka-chink and would measure out your quarters. And I thought that was such a great difference between Warren Buffett and Michael Dell's personality.
Gay, when you ask that question, what's the earliest present that you remember receiving? What are you trying to hone in on there?
I'm trying to hone in on two things. One, I want to see the person's eyes light up so I can identify how that person registers joy. I'm keenly interested in body language all the time. That's how I can, sort of my edge in consulting and coaching people, is I often can pick up pieces of body language that have something that a person isn't communicating or is afraid to communicate. And so that's part of my, when I used to do a lot of on-site consulting in companies, that was oftentimes how I got things done quickly. I could see it when a person was withholding anger or something they were nervous about or something they didn't want to buy into, so learning to read those kind of subtleties are very important to me. So I want to see a person's eyes light up. And I haven't found a much better question to, what was the first present you got for Christmas, or whatever the person identifies as? And oftentimes their eyes will go, I got a electric train, or, I got a change maker, the kind that bus drivers use, or I got a calculator. So that's one thing I want to do. The other thing I want to do is open up a space of wonder in my clients, because wonder is the most underutilized tool that human beings have as a change tool in ourselves. Because many of us go around, especially as we get more successful, in thinking we're right and, prizing being right. But I say you want to prize actually being wrong a lot of the time and learning to make corrections, because nobody's right all the time. But the people that get stuck oftentimes in boardroom situations or in executive interchanges are people who dig in their heels and think they're right, which is really based on fear, something they're afraid about. But a lot of people, instead of opening up to their emotions and things, will dig in more on being right and kind of tank situations that could be elevated.
As an adult, should we be striving for that childlike wonder? To me, it seems like something that when we're children, it just comes very naturally to us. And then maybe as we get older, we kind of suppress that, or we don't pay attention to that wonder.
Yes, it's so true, Andy, because I remember reading in the notebooks of Albert Einstein. You can't see it, but I have an autographed picture of Albert Einstein on the wall that my wife gave me one year for my birthday, and it's one of my prized possessions. But he said in his notebooks that he wondered about a particular problem in physics for 27 years straight before he kind of figured it out. And to me, that just knocked me out, because 10 seconds of wonder oftentimes opens up a situation that has been clogged or not creative for a while. See, the thing is about wonder is, to answer your question, yes, we should prize it as adults, because that act of wonder is really an act of letting go. And that act is so important. Letting go is much more important than hanging on in most situations, because what happens is I'll walk into a situation, let's say there'll be 3 members of a board sitting in a big room, and I'll walk in and these people have been arguing and stuck about something for 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks by the time they get around to calling me and I get there. Sometimes they've been stuck for a couple of months and haven't been able to budge about something. So one of the first things I want to do is invoke some kind of sense of wonder in them. So I might ask a question like, as you tune into the work you're doing right now, How much of it is stuff you absolutely love to do? What percentage of it do you absolutely love to do? And that kind of catapults a person into wonder. It doesn't exactly address the situation, but it addresses everything about the situation. Because if you can get people unstuck from being right for 10 seconds, you can create a real interactional miracle.
It's so interesting to hear that concept of wonder being this key that can unlock like 3 board members who are having a very difficult conflict, and suddenly that difficulty is unlocked and the 3 can move forward.
It's quite a miracle. I always tell people I get to live on a steady diet of miracles because I get to see all these breakthroughs, because oftentimes by the time I get into the situation, people have been stuck so long, they're also sick of being stuck. So I come in and do a little stuff and they get opened up quickly. But here's the thing. Why wonder is important too, Andy, is that it's the antidote to fear. And when people are stuck in a boardroom situation or a living room situation or a bedroom situation, I can almost guarantee that underneath that issue is something that both people are scared about that they haven't identified yet. And so that's why, like in the new book, The Genius Zone, I say we're getting dozens of opportunities every day to jump into our genius. And it's those very situations where you get stuck in that's often the very situation where you can break free if you can apply a moment of wonder and genuine curiosity to it.
Gay, you and your wife, Katie, have trained thousands of coaches. You've appeared on Oprah. You've hosted seminars around the globe. What percentage of us fear owning our own potential?
What a great question. Thank you, Andy. Well, that brings up a wave of sadness in me, because I remember talking to a colleague of mine, Jean Houston, who's done a lot of traveling around the world, and she was saying that, and I was agreeing with her, she said that in her travels, that it's not the poverty or the poor standard of living that often is causing the most pain. The pain she sees on people's faces is the pain of not being able to access their creativity, not being able to live their potential, not being able to draw on the resources that they have to improve their lives and improve their families' lives. And I had to agree with that, because I think as I've been around the world now the equivalent of, I think, 30 sometimes, 32 or 3 times. And I've done our work in practically every continent on earth. And the one thing I've noticed too is that certain look on people's faces when they're not meeting their potential, when they have a yearning inside them for what I call expressing your genius. By the way, when I talk about genius, I'm not just talking about Einstein or something like that. I'm talking about the unique abilities that you and I and other people have inside ourselves, our organic abilities. So I call that genius because it's kind of like once you open up to it, it is letting the genie out of the box, because you never know where your creativity was going to take you. When I opened up kind of the dialogue with my creativity when I was 24 years old, I was a teacher in a school for juvenile delinquents. Little did I know I was going to go get my master's degree and my PhD in counseling and then write books about it and end up on Oprah and things like that. I mean, you just never know where your creativity is going to take you. But I read something by Buckminster Fuller when I was in my 20s, that something that had happened for him when he was in his 20s, where he had gotten very depressed and despairing, and he was, I think, on the point of suicide. And then he decided to make a new deal with the universe. And his deal was, I'll use every bit of creativity I have to make discoveries that improve humanity. And in return for that, I'd like not to have to think about money. I want to have, he, like me, I like to think about money in the big picture sense, but like my wife, fortunately, is very particular about things. Like, until I met her, I had never once balanced my checkbook. I had plenty of money. I just wasn't good at counting it. And so I think, who was it said, Michael Gerber said that every business needs an SOB, a visionary, and a bean counter. And so when I got to the point where I could hire my bean counter, I had plenty of visionary going on, but I was very deficient in the area of bean counting. So fortunately, I have a large number of excellent bean counters around me now.
So I think that we know that money is a complex issue for many people. And you talked about genius and fear. And I think that's like integral in money conversations too. To what extent do people have an upper limit problem with money? Or do we think about our genius, our potential, and the money is a byproduct of that?
Well, yes, and yes, in the sense that money and your overall sense of well-being inside yourself, as well as your relationships, all start from way down inside. Because in your life, depending on your programming, you could have an inner intention of, let's say you've come from a place of scarcity, and your adaptation to that is to say, I'm going to get what's rightfully mine, what I'm entitled to. So you come at it from that fear, that scarcity. And then another person, I always say, if the Dalai Lama walked into a convenience store, he would have different intentions than if a thief came into the store. And so everything starts from our inner intentions and then goes out from there. So, for example, to make it very practical, when my wife and I got together, I had just been on a sabbatical where I'd spent a lot of money on travels and things like that. And so we were kind of broke when we got together. And so we decided one day, I identified a limiting money conversation in my mind. I was on my exercise bike at the time, actually, and this popped into my mind. I realized I'd been hearing this conversation around me all my life. Do we have enough money to get through to the end of the month? I heard it constantly when I was a kid. Pretty much it was a routine affair. That was a conversation that was going on. And I had embedded that somehow in my mind, that I was on my exercise bike and I had that thought run through my mind. Oh, do we have enough money to get to the end? And I realized, wait a minute. I'm perpetuating a conversation that I didn't even enjoy hearing the first time. I'm bringing it into my own life. And so I remember going into Katie at the time. By the way, we've been together a little over 40 years now. We're about to have our 40th wedding anniversary. And so this goes back to the year of, say, 1980. So we had this conversation, though, where I told her what I had just experienced in my mind. And I said, let's sit down and actually make up our own financial reality, how we want it to be. And I'll tell you how long ago this was. We came up with this idea, this main idea, that we always have plenty of money to do everything we want to do. That became our guiding, kind of our mantra, that we always have plenty of money. In fact, we said, we always have enough money. And then we identified, oh, wait a minute, let's put plenty in there. So our guiding mantra became, we always have enough money, plenty of money to do everything we want to do. And so we made little corrections on that as we went along. And then we said, wouldn't it be great if we had $1,000 just like stuck in a savings account that we never touched? Wouldn't that be fantastic? And so we put a practical goal on it. We said that we always have at least $1,000 set aside that we don't even need to touch. Well, once we got our heads together on our finances, we blew past our goal many times over, and we got to where we were setting bigger and bigger goals. Like, okay, we always have at least $100,000 and that we could get our hands on by Friday. That became our mantra. I don't know why we picked Friday, but then later on we said we always have at least $1 million set aside for Friday money. So we've gradually built up our kind of like you go to the gym every day and do a few chin-ups, and pretty soon at the end of the year you're strong. So we kind of did it incrementally as we built up over the years. We kept adding more and more to that. Now we have another mantra that we use now in addition to the first one, which all of our money is carefully invested, and it's an idea that brings forth and provides money to our foundation and things like that. We have a nonprofit foundation that we feed a lot of profits from our institute into to give scholarships and fund research and things like that.
When you and Katie come up with a mantra together, do you need to consciously follow that up by figuring out what are some of the steps that we need to put in place to reach this goal? Or is it just a mantra that you can sort of meditate on and you're not worried about the specifics?
Well, start with the mantra itself. Start with the idea itself. That's call it a central intention, maybe, if you don't like the word mantra, but whatever it is, it's an idea that you're attempting to implant at the center of your thinking processes. And so I say, first, implant the idea for no good reason, for no expectation of reward or no expectation of punishment or anything like that. Just if you like that idea. For example, the one that's in the Big Leap that says, I expand every day in love, success, and creativity as I inspire others to do the same. That's a big, general, global idea, but it guides every decision I make, because everything that comes my way, I can say, okay, will this help me expand in love, abundance, creativity? Will it help me inspire other people to do the same? And I tell you, I've gotten so good at saying no in my life. I always tell my students that learning to say no is just as important in business as learning to say yes. As a matter of fact, one of my business mentors, a big developer out in the Northwest named Jerry Jones, now deceased, wonderful man, he said, the best deals you'll ever make are the deals you don't make. Boy, did that make an impact on me, because sometimes I've made deals in my life and maybe overrode some initial glitch. Maybe I didn't quite like the people, but it looked like such a good deal. And those kind of things where I override my natural body inclinations, my natural yes or no, I almost always get myself in trouble. So I've really learned to perfect the art of saying no without making the other person wrong. Saying no in a way that really liberates the person to go get the funds elsewhere or go try it out the pitch on somebody else. So I probably listen to 50, 60 pitches a year, one a week. That's what I have time for these days, because people often like to get my advice on whether something will succeed in the marketplace that I represent, which is transformationally minded people, whether they're in business or in personal life or in their marriages. So there's a very large market out there. And so, but I'm always blown away by the number of really good ideas that come through that I just go ahead and say no to because they don't meet all of my criteria, especially at this stage of my life. I'm really, I've gotten off a bunch of boards and things like that because I'm in my 70s now, and I want to preserve the precious essence of my creativity. I write every morning from 5 to 7:30, and so I want to keep my creativity sharp for that. So I'm very loath anymore to get involved in things that don't really light me up.
So I like the fact that the mantra or this central intention, the more you sort of focus on that, it sounds like your priorities are changing, and it's sort of driving what items you're taking action on and how you're focusing your time. Can you give us an example? Because I do love the enlightened no. I will admit that I have a hard time saying no. I think I'm a little bit agreeable, and I tend to say yes a little too frequently. And with your idea of the enlightened no, it's a very elegant way to say no. I think the example in your book that you gave, you really made an impression on the person that you said no to. So share with our listeners and viewers, give us an example. Like, how can we say no and do it well?
I just happen to have a very recent example. A friend of mine, actually, I was an investor in this friend of mine's business for a while, and then she cashed me out, but we're good friends. And she got in touch with me and said that a friend of hers had written a book on a particular subject that was in my general sweet spot of things I like to read about. And would I read the book, would I meet the person, read the book, and possibly give a blurb for the book? Okay, and so that's a common thing in my world. I don't know how many hundred invitations I get to give a blurb every year, but I can only give a few, so I don't want to encourage that. But anyway, I said yes to this one out of friendship, pretty much. I probably wouldn't have said yes otherwise. But then the person got in touch with me, gave me the book. I read the book fairly carefully, and as I read it, I realized that it just was too niche of a thing, that it wouldn't interest people that I speak to most of the time. It was just too small a subject for that. And yet it was a noble piece of work. I mean, the person had probably spent years of their lives doing it with pictures and everything like that. And so here's what an enlightened no sounds like. I really was impressed by how much work you put into this, the amount of depth of knowledge that you convey in this book, and the pictures are brilliant and everything like that. And yet I found myself losing interest in it after a few chapters because I'm just not fascinated by that subject, that particular small area of that subject. And so that was my first enlightened no, was just to say how I felt about it and not to hold back on that. You see, because the difference between a no and an enlightened no is with an enlightened no, you give yourself and the other person room to feel and express all of their feelings about it. Most people that are trying to say no are just trying to shut the other person up and move them along. But an enlightened no is what you really need to do, because those types of no, I don't want to hear about it kind of things always creates karma that comes back around to bite you later, and you don't complete the subject. The only way to say no successfully is to really give everybody permission to feel and express how they feel about it. And here's what happened with this particular author. So I said a few more things. It said that that I truly I couldn't give her, I didn't want to give her a blurb because I didn't think my blurb would mean anything to that particular audience. Maybe it would, but it was a kind of a narrow audience, and would they even know who I was, you know? And so would it do you any good? And would you be better served looking for somebody else? And I said, I don't know who that person is, but I just can't do it myself. So I thoroughly explained as best I could how I felt about it and didn't hold anything back. And the beautiful thing was, I got back an email from the author who said, I was very disappointed and so forth that you couldn't give me a blurb, but I have so much respect for you as a result of the way you did it. Well, that to me is the best possible news we can get when we say no, isn't it? Because you want the person to say, okay, I get it, and I'm sad about that, and I honor you for making that decision. That was successful to me.
I love that, because I think that, as you said, both sides appreciate where the no came from, and there's I think, mutual understanding. I think part of being able to execute an enlightened no requires self-awareness. You have to understand yourself and know what your zone of genius is. Do you find that people know what their zone of genius is when they work with you or when they engage with you?
I would say about 1%
Whoa.
do. That it's an enlightened fishing expedition, because, I mean, how many times has somebody in school asked you, Andy, what do you feel like your true genius is? Usually most of us say 0, but that happened. I ask people that all the time, and almost nobody ever says anybody asked them. Well, so the first thing I like to tell people is that even when I thought of the idea myself 40 years ago, when I first realized, oh, wait a minute, I have an upper limit problem. I don't allow myself to really live in my true unique abilities. I'm not even letting myself to earn my living with my real genius. I had that thought, maybe going back 40 years. And then I started working with clients and asking them. And I found that even really gifted people that are CEO level, people that are in a business, or very high-powered inventors and people like that, almost nobody is using more than about 10% of their real genius. Here's what happens. Some people use their genius to get into their field. Well, here's the thing. I've walked down the corridors with a CEO and had the following conversation. I used to go out to Monsanto a long time ago to consult with their team out there when they were kind of trying to go more environmentally friendly back in the 90s. And they had a very visionary CEO at the time named Bob Shapiro, amazing guy. And I remember walking down the hall with him and asking him the question about how much time each day he spent in his genius zone. By the way, I define that as doing what you most love to do, which also makes the largest contribution to people around you, whether it's your business or your family. So doing what you love to do, you're in the sweet spot of that, and you're also doing something that makes your biggest contribution to other people. That's your genius zone. And I started thinking about that a long time ago, and I would ask people, like with Bob, I said, how much time a day do you spend? And he was thinking about it. And he's the kind of guy that will genuinely ponder something for a while. And so we're walking down the hall, and finally he said, maybe 10, 15%. And then he explained why. That when he first got into business, it was more. But then as more requirements got added on, it became harder and harder to spend any time in his genius zone. And so he kept making little compromises. And pretty soon it's shrinking down to the point where I've actually had the CEO say to me, if I just could have 10 minutes a day in my office without interruption to think, it would make such a difference. And I'm saying, well, hey, who's going to make that happen around here, unless it's you. And so what we do here, we offer these packages to companies where they will send us a C-suite executive for a day. And it's, it's kind of a big deal. It's a $25,000 thing. And the person gets picked up at the airport and spends 7 or 8 hours intense coaching and then delivered back to their hotel or to the airport. So it's an intense day-long experience. And the clock is, ticking by. And since it's $25,000, it's something they're usually very invested in. And so it's the people that sent them here. The very first thing we ask them to do, and probably the most valuable thing on the whole menu, I'll give it to you free. Here's a $25,000 technique. We ask them to go in a room by themselves. There's not even a picture on the wall, and sit in a chair, a comfortable chair, for 10 minutes and do nothing but ask the following question in the following way. We ask them to say, either out loud or in their mind. We ask them to do it out loud first. What do I most love to do? And we always have them introduce it with a to invoke genuine wonder. And then we ask them, every time they ask the question, to pause for 3 deep, easy breaths, and then ask the question again. So get the picture there. You're asking, what do I most love to do? And then 3 easy, deep breaths that takes maybe 30 seconds. And then you ask the question again. And we've had people come out, what I get a kick out of is somebody who come out and they have a Harvard MBA or, blah, blah, blah. And they'll say, that was the greatest thing I have ever done in my life. Or sometimes they'll say, that was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. And the reason is because very few of us are used to genuinely wondering about something so profound, and especially for 10 minutes. And we use 10 minutes because of a great quotation from the philosopher Blaise Pascal many years ago. The philosopher said, all of humankind's troubles come from the inability to be in a room by ourselves for 10 minutes doing nothing. And so we asked the person to go in that room for 10 minutes and just reflect on what am I really in love with and have been ever since I could walk. And it's something that it's very simple. Like for me, I tell a story in the book about when I got my first tricycle. I rode around my grandmother's living room. She had this huge living room and it was raining. My mother had a little house next door, but my grandmother had the big living room. And so my grandmother gave me special permission to ride my trike around. I was like 4 or 5 years old. And this was in Florida where it rains a lot. So this was a big treat for me to ride around in my grandmother's living room. And the first thing I did was I got my granddad to set up a big cardboard box in the corner of her living room. And I would commute to my cardboard box and sit in there. That became my office. And while I was in my office, I was there to listen to people's problems and to give them advice. And I was very clear. This amused everybody greatly. This became a great family story. I told everybody that I did not deal with medical problems because they could go to an ordinary doctor for that. I only dealt with problems. I was trying to communicate problems like around the house here. I think it was my primitive way of trying to save my nutcase family from being in arguments all the time, because it was often like World War III around the house when I was growing up. So anyway, I was a budding psychologist at age 4 or 5 there. So I think if we look back into our early days, we can find things that we love to do that have that juicy, deep, easy feeling to them. That's a sign of your genius.
Do you find that sometimes, I'm trying to think of, when you're working on a paper, or since you're an author, you've written many books. Sometimes when you're writing your own book and you're looking at your own book, you're so close to it that obvious things don't jump out at you. Like you're blind to it because you're too deep in it. Do you find that one's family, friends, or if you're a manager, your direct reports probably know what your zone of genius is? Like they can see it and state it much easier than you can yourself.
Yes, that's another one of our things we do is we invite people to go out to certain people in their life and recruit them into the process of bringing forth their genius. I think it was Brian Tracy one time who said, your life is determined by the books you read and the people you know. And that, if you think about it, I always tell my clients that you don't want 100 friends. You want 3 to 5 people whose faces light up when you walk in the room. Start there first. Find those 5 people or 3 people. You want 3 to 5 people, your face lights up when they walk in the room. So I went to great lengths to create that kind of people in my life, but also I went to great lengths to create first readers that can give me often very brutal feedback on my first drafts of things. And I'll give credit to a few of them right now. A wonderful writer woman I know named Janine Roth. I often send her things to read. One of my other buddies, Jim Selman, I often send him what I'm reading. And then, of course, I have an agent that will give me feedback so brutal, sometimes it takes me days to recover from it. But the thing is, they're usually right. If they give you some feedback, they may not give it, but if you've asked for it, I recommend taking it any way you can get it. Because to me, life is about having a continuous conscious dialogue with what's going on around me. Here at the Institute, we use a 20-point openness to learning scale that we give people when they come in. And it ranges from 10 points below the line to 10 points above the line. And so how open are you to learning? Are you one of those people that, like one of the first one, the body language part of the below the line is, are you one of those people that listens with your arms folded across your chest and a kind of a skeptical look on your face? I remember a person that I worked with for many years, one of the deans in the university I taught at. That was his habitual position, a scowl and kind of like holding his hands over his heart so he didn't make sure he didn't feel anything. Or are you one of those people higher on the plus side of the scale? Are you one of those persons that says, hey, I've got a problem about you that I want to discuss with you? Are you the person that says, what? Or are you the person that says, oh, okay, tell me more about that? That makes a huge difference in life, because it's our space of listening that we come from that invites people to speak into that honestly. So if you go around complaining that people don't speak honestly to you, you have to look first at what's inside, is how open you are to hearing the absolute truth from everybody in your life. And I find the people that really prosper. I was just reading over the weekend again, Ray Dalio's book, Principles, one of the best business books. I think it was the business book of the year in 17 or something like that. It's been out a few years now, but boy, is that worth a reread from time to time, because how he created his culture of openness in his business is something that everybody could benefit from, even if you don't have a business. Just creating a culture of transparency where it's okay to question things. It's okay to share negative feelings. It's not okay to go around hiding things to please the boss or anything like that. So he managed in his career to create that culture of transparency. It was the same kind of thing I was working to create down at Dell Computer and at other places that I've consulted. But if you can institute that culture of transparency and constant openness to genius, you've got the situation where it's just alive with vibrance and creativity. It's a beautiful thing to see. I don't do much on-site consulting anymore, just because I'm in a later stage of my life and don't travel as much anymore. But I for about 20 years, I was walking the halls of a lot of different companies back in the 80s and 90s and worked with a little over 1,000 executives. And one thing I've found over and over and over again, how people at the top are so open to learning. Like I just remember saying something to Michael Dell one time, and he didn't stop to be defensive about it or argue about it. He just put it into practice right there. I could see him go, chomp, digest the information, put it into practice. And that's, I was in a room with him one time when a stock market split occurred that added $850 million to his net worth. And no big deal. It was just, okay, cool, let's go have lunch. And I respect that so much, because to dip into my old English major background, one of the great poets, Walt Whitman, said, I am large and contain multitudes. And each of us, as human beings, we are large and contain multitudes. We have a whole stack of programming in us that makes up our personality, and we've got a whole stack of programming that makes up our motivation to get up in the morning. And so our job in life is to learn to accept and open up to and transcend that part of our programming which is creating havoc in our lives, or creating misery, or creating lack of success, to consciously make a declaration that I'm here to express my genius in the world. I'm here to do that in a way that inspires other people also. I think if we can come at the world from that kind of attitude, everything becomes one step in success after the other, because as I talk about in the new book, if you learn to recognize them, you're getting dozens of shots at your genius every day. It's just most of us are looking the other way when those moments, what I call genius moments, actually happen.
Once we've defined our zone of genius, not our zone of excellence or our zone of competence, but our zone of genius, can you talk a little bit about upper limit problems and upper limit behaviors? Because it sounds like we are our own worst enemies.
Yes. Well, here's the thing I learned. that the upper limit behaviors are things that you wouldn't even often recognize as upper limit behaviors. One of them is worry thoughts. 99%, I promise you this, if you will perform an experiment, if you will perform an experiment for me on exactly your thoughts every day and ask yourself this question: how many of my thoughts are about something that I could actually do something about? You'll find that if you're lucky, about 1% of your thoughts are something that you could do something about. Like, here's a good thought. I feel hungry right now. Yes, I could go eat something when this interview is over. Okay, so there's a thought. It's not exactly a worry thought, but let's say I had, I wonder if Andy likes me. See, that's a thought that I have absolutely no control over. I don't have any control over whether you like me or not. You're talking to me for 45 minutes, so part of you must, but it's none of my business what you think of me. Only my business is delivering whatever I want to deliver in the best possible way I can. And so most of our thoughts are about things that we don't have any control over. And I give a whole technology in the new book about how to unwind those thoughts. And it's worth, by the way, the Genius Zone book is not a book to take to the beach and prop up your legs and read. You got to sit down and actually do it. I'm probably ruining my book sales right now, but I just have to be honest about it. It's taken from actual real things I do in my office. So it's worth really sitting down and putting your earphones on or whatever you do to get really focused, because you'll get so much out of that hour. So in life, like, worry thoughts are almost always about things we don't have any control over. Arguments are almost always upper limit problems. Accidents and illness are often an upper limit problem, because I cannot count the number of clients over the years who have said, I got my biggest win at work, and then I went home that afternoon and had the biggest argument of my life with my spouse. That's the upper limit problem in action. Or sometimes it can be the other way around. People have told me things are going so great at home, and then I had this huge mess up at work that then messed up everything at home, and because I wasn't able to be there in the same way I was. And so the upper limit problem, what you have to know, though, is that underneath it, they are caused by fears. And they are caused by certain specific fears that if you can begin to tune into what those are in you, I can run down some of them. You'll just have to go kind of looking inside and say, does that apply to me? One of them that I find in many people, even successful people, is they're carrying around an old fear of outshining others or outdoing others, that they want to kind of keep their light hidden so that they don't make other people feel bad with their brilliance. Because a lot of the people I work with are people that were really gifted when they were kids, but they had to kind of hide their light a little bit. And so that's one of them. Probably the biggest fear that a lot of people carry around is a fear that there's something fundamentally bad about me, or fundamentally undeserving of love, or fundamentally undeserving of success. And, at this stage of the game, I've worked with, people who win Oscars and win Grammys and things like that. I actually had on the porch of my place over at the beach, I live up in a little mountain valley now, but we used to have a place down at the beach in Carpinteria. And I remember one day I got a call from a fella, a client of mine, who was having a panic attack, and I hadn't heard from him for a while. And I had him come over to the house, and the panic attack was about the next day. He was going to go down and get his palm prints in the sidewalk, down there on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Why was he having an anxiety attack? You'd think he'd be jumping around happy, 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 but he had managed to create a real day of fear and misery, because that old fear of being fundamentally wrong or fundamentally undeserving was just coming big time to the surface, because there was no way you can go get your hands in the Hollywood Walk of Fame and be undeserving. You're demonstrating that. So of course it had awakened this. So, the techniques we use here are the same ones that are in the books, which we invite him to be with that and understand that fear and understand that it is fear, and to be with that, and then to just open up and receive. See, if there's one thing that human beings are blocked on, it's this ability to receive what is fundamentally, organically there for us, that we're blocked. Oftentimes we get promoted to give all the time, but we're not encouraged to receive, to really let ourselves receive to the max. And so that's often one of the big things to receiving, is to underneath it all, to deal with whatever fear that's blocking it.
And that ultimate success mantra, I expand in abundance, success, and love every day as I inspire those around me to do the same, that helps to remedy the fears of the Hollywood Walk of Fame?
Yes. As soon as he got through understanding what his fear is, in fact, you'll get a kick out of this. I bet your viewers and listeners will. I oftentimes do very practical things with my clients. So I happen to have a stack of quarters that were, I forget what they were for laundry in the building or something like that. It was a beach condo where we were having this conversation. And so I took my stack of quarters and I took him out on the balcony overlooking the ocean with him. And I put a quarter in his hand and he looked at it. He said, "What's that for?" And I said, "Don't worry about it. Just receive it. Don't question where it's coming from. Don't question what it's for. Just receive the damn thing." And so I put another one in his hand. And he sort of stared at it. I said, "Put another one in his hand." Finally, I've got about 4 quarters in his hand. He got the message. Oh, I could just receive these quarters without wondering why he's giving them to me. So we had this wonderful experience of just 1 quarter after the other. And when he'd had 10 in his hand, I would take those and we'd do it again. But getting to breathe through this fear of receiving, just to, instead of acting out of that fear by tensing up, I just had him breathe with it, be with it. Around here we say fear is only excitement without the breath.
Well, to allay any of your worries, since you say, "Does Andy like me?" I love you, Dr. Gay. And
you.
I think that...
And I appreciate you so much, what you're doing in the world. Thank you so much, Andy. I think having an inspired conversation with money is going to make a huge difference in a lot of people's lives.
I hope so. And I think that your book, The Big Leap, not only do I think it will help me in my business and with my show, but every time I'm behind the wheel and I'm driving, I will be thinking of you, because you talk about not worrying about things outside of our control. And I think when I'm driving, there's so many of those things. The worry, the blame, the criticism. I need to let all of that go and just drive happily. Just get to my destination.
Yes.
Don't worry about the guy who, cut you off or changed lanes or didn't signal.
Yeah, I've driven where you drive many times up and down the turnpike there. I even drove up and down the turnpike one time when a cop came up. I had such a beater car at the time, an old beat up car. He came up behind me and kind of gestured me to go faster or move over into another lane. So I've actually been busted for going too slow on the New Jersey Turnpike.
Okay, so in wrapping up, since you mentioned Einstein and shared with us one of your most prized presents that you received from your wife, can you leave us with a little bit about this idea of Einstein time? Because in this digital age that we're in, so many of us feel that we don't have time. We have to read emails. We don't have time to do things.
Yes. Well, Einstein time comes from, it's one of the things we teach here, executives and others, and it comes from a story that Einstein told. They asked him, "How would you explain the theory of relativity to a kid?" And, a 12-year-old, something like that. And he said, A minute sitting on a hot stove goes by like an hour, but an hour with your boyfriend or girlfriend goes by like a minute. And so I remember hearing, what does that actually mean? And in psychological and even physical terms, what it means is when you're sitting on a hot stove, when you're having an unpleasant experience, everything in you contracts to get away from that experience. And in the contraction to get away from the experience you're having, if you don't like the experience you're having, you're trying to get away from it, it slows down time. So a minute sitting there on the hot stove, since you're trying to get away from it the whole time, it just feels like time is ticking by very slowly. Whereas if you're with a person you love, if you're embracing your beloved, whoo, time goes by so fast. And whoosh, an hour goes by and you realize, oh my goodness, we've got to, go somewhere. And so time disappears. And so what I create with Einstein Time is that when we get in the space of doing what we most love to do and what makes our biggest contribution to the world, time takes on a different quality. That instead of being in a hurry or being too slow, it puts you just in time. If you're loving exactly what you're doing and you're doing what's making your greatest contribution to the world, all the cells of you are expanding. All parts of you are flowing with the flow. You're flowing with the flow of your genius. And in that space, you enter a timeless zone. So what I recommend, the very practical thing to do is first stop complaining about time and thinking of yourself as the victim of time. The best thing you can possibly do in the beginning is stop saying things like, oh, I've got to run, I'm going to be late, or gee, I wish I had time to talk, but I don't, or oh my goodness, I never have enough time, or what was the one I remember hearing my mother say all the time? She was a very busy career woman when I was a kid. Oh, it's, there aren't enough hours in the day. That was one of her impassioned declarations. And so if you are finding yourself in a time crunch, or if you've made an adaptation on the other side, if you're one of those people that always shows up late, never quite gets it together, shows up at 10:02 for a 10 o'clock meeting, well, that's another adaptation to time. So what I recommend is to open up to your genius and spend more time doing what you most love to do, because that puts you in this timeless sweet spot of where time is not an issue. You certainly show up on places in time, but what you put your focus on is doing what you most love to do and spending more physical time doing that every day.
So make plenty of time to do the things that you want to do.
Exactly.
Gay, how do you define success?
Success is exactly what the Big Leap success mantra says. It's doing what I most love to do while making the biggest contribution I can possibly make. So that finding that sweet spot hookup between what you most love to do and what can provide the biggest abundance and satisfaction to people around you. To me, that's success. That's the sweet spot I've lived in for the last 20 or 30 years, and it feels absolutely delicious. Because especially for the last 20 years, I got so good at my Enlightened No that I haven't really spent any time doing anything that I don't absolutely love to do. And it just makes for a very wonderful lifestyle where the people around me all feel the same way. And so my whole community feels that way, the people I hang around with and the people that work with me and the people in my larger worldwide community. And so I recommend that as soon as possible, everybody get to the place where they're living in that genius zone. The new book is really about how to live in the genius zone. The Big Leap is kind of about how to get the catapult into your genius zone. And the new book is about how to kind of steer your way through life so that you stay there. But to me, that's a sacred thing. We all owe that to ourselves. And so my life has never been as wonderful as it has become ever since I made a declaration way back to living in my genius and to doing more things in my genius zone every day.
Well, thank you for leaving us with that. And let's toast to delicious. Can you tell the Inspired Money listeners and viewers where they can learn more about you, follow you, and get your new book?
Yes. To get the book, the best place to get it is geniuszonebook.com, because if you go to geniuszonebook.com and buy the book through there, through one of the people like Amazon or wherever, you can download a free 15-minute audio meditation, and I highly recommend that audio meditation. I did it myself, and what I did, it takes the key affirmations from the Big Leap and the Genius Zone and puts them into a 15-minute with music and breathing and that kind of thing. So it's a beautiful thing. You could do it every day. It's really great to kind of implant the ideas in your head. So go to geniuszonebook.com to buy the book. And then people can find me always at hendricks.com, HENDRICKS.com. You can find all the things that Katie and I do there.
Thank you, Gay. I'll put that all in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Andy. Blessings to you. Thank you for living in your genius zone.
Thank you. So what was your favorite Inspired Money moment? I love the idea of the enchanted no. It's an elegant way to say no. More importantly, it requires you to know when to say no to things that are outside your genius zone. Focus and don't compromise. The result can lead to happiness and greater success. If you had a different favorite Inspired Money moment, let me know by posting a comment below. For watching to the end, I want to send you this Inspired Money sticker. Go to inspiredmoney.fm/Andy, send me your name and address, and I will put this in the mail for you. Thank you so much for joining me on this mission. Have an inspired week and do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.